As more and more begin to know the status quo has got to go, they're bound to say yes to a man named Dr. No, a man who makes the establishment panic. Grassroots are growing way too wild, too organic.
President Biden recently repeated the claim that high prices are caused by greedy businesses. Biden is not alone in trying to gaslight the people into thinking price inflation is rooted in the actions of private individuals and not the fiat money system Americans have lived with since 1971. In the media, we see excessive consumer spending on luxury items, for example, being blamed for continued price inflation. The fact is that increased consumer demand can only cause prices to rise in those sectors of the economy subject to the increased demand. Prices increasing across the economy are always the result of the Federal Reserve's conduct of monetary policy. Trying to minimize the harm of inflation, some people in government and media will insist that while many prices for goods are higher than they were pre-lockdown, they are still lower than they were in the 1990s when you consider that the quality of these goods has increased. The argument is that buyers are getting higher value today than 30 years ago. Of course, any increased quality is because of market-driven innovation. If America had a free market monetary system instead of central bank-controlled fiat currency, prices would drop as quality increases. It's also important not to ignore the fact that the Federal Reserve's devaluation of the dollar's purchasing power creates an incentive for individuals to spend money as soon as they receive it, and a disincentive for them to save. This is because the dollar will have less value a year from now than today. Therefore, high levels of spending are a rational response to an irrational fiat money system. High prices and supply shortages were inevitable after the lockdowns. However, prices would have adjusted back more if the Federal Reserve had not pushed interest rates to zero. While the Fed has raised interest rates, it has not raised rates to anywhere near where they would likely be in a free market. In fact, rates are not at historically high levels, yet many worry the Fed's rate increases are pushing the economy toward a recession. This shows how addicted Americans are to the Fed's easy money. When the dollar's purchasing power erodes, workers will seek higher wages. This is why periods of high price inflation are accompanied by strikes and other types of union activity aimed at increasing wages. This has made unions another popular scapegoat for price inflation when the truth is that Fed-caused price increases are the real reasons behind labor unrest. Sadly, the increase in nominal wages gained by the recent series of strikes is unlikely to keep up with the declining real wages resulting from the Federal Reserve's assault on the dollar's value. This is why, contrary to the claims of many progressives, working people are the victims, not the beneficiaries, of price inflation. As a Texas union official once told me, gold has always been the friend of the worker. This makes sense because gold is money whose value cannot be manipulated by the central bank. Inflation is the act of money creation by the Fed, and high prices are a symptom of inflation, not a cause, and not the fault of greedy business, consumers, and unions. The Federal Reserve is also the engine of the welfare warfare state. Therefore, to restore a system of limited government, individual liberty, and free markets, Congress must cut spending and audit, then end the Fed. Thanks for listening.
So Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant on Monday rejected international pressure for a ceasefire in Gaza and signaled that the brutal assault will continue for months or even longer. So in just over 2 months of Israel's campaign in Gaza, that's as long as it's been, 2 months and a few days, at least 18,000 Palestinians have been killed, including over 7,000 children. The number of wounded is very high. Over 49,000 people have been injured. And the casualty numbers are from Gaza's health ministry. They're considered to be a low estimate because they're not accounting for the people trapped under the rubble, the bodies, and the people that are still alive. On top of the massive death toll from Israel's airstrikes and ground operations, health services in Gaza have collapsed, and that's due to these Israeli attacks on hospitals. They're laying siege to hospitals, and just the Israeli siege on Gaza in general, a lack of fuel accounts for a lot of the hospitals having to close, having to shut down. Palestinians are also facing severe food shortages, so if this thing does continue for months and months, we will start seeing people dying from hunger and disease. Doctors Without Borders said on Monday that its employees in southern Gaza have seen, quote, the complete collapse of healthcare services in the area, along with the rest of the healthcare system in Gaza, end quote. So these horrific scenes that are coming out of Gaza have prompted more calls for peace and negotiations, but the U.S. has not been fazed as it continues to provide unconditional military support, and they vetoed that resolution at the UN Security Council. So back to Gallant, the Israeli defense minister, he told the Associated Press on Monday that it would take time, speaking about Israel's operations in Gaza, and he suggested that the current phase of the war, which involved constant airstrikes and heavy ground fighting, will last for weeks, and that further military action against what he called pockets of resistance would continue for months. And then Hanegbi, who's the Israeli National Security Advisor, he made similar comments, saying that the time it will take to achieve Israel's goals in Gaza, quote, cannot be measured in weeks, and I'm not sure it can be measured in months, end quote. So suggesting this thing could, last for a year or longer. And there was a Financial Times report recently that said that Israeli officials expect this thing to last for over a year. Zelensky arrived in the U.S. on Monday and pleaded for more military aid in a speech at the National Defense University in Washington, where he was introduced by Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin. So Zelensky said, quote, Ukrainians haven't given up and won't give up. We know what to do, and you can count on Ukraine, and we hope just as much to be able to count on you, end quote. So Zelensky's visit comes as the White House is pressuring Congress to pass that massive $111 billion spending bill that includes over $60 billion for Ukraine, and the idea is to fund the war for another year. The White House has said that if Congress does not authorize the funds, the U.S. will run out of money for the war. Zelensky said, quote, every one of you here understands for a soldier to wait for munitions, waiting for weeks, months without knowing if support will come at all. Every one of you with command experience knows what it means when, instead of moving forward, you're just watching, waiting for armor or equipment while your enemy is satisfied and preparing for assaults, end quote. So despite Ukraine's failed counteroffensive, Zelensky is determined to continue the war, even as his top general has said Ukrainian forces cannot break through Russian defenses, and Ukraine is facing a manpower shortage. Aides close to Zelensky have said in comments to Time magazine that he is deluding himself into thinking Ukraine can win the war. Doesn't matter to Biden, Blinken, Sullivan. They just want to keep this thing going. So Zelensky will meet with Biden on Tuesday and is set to hold talks with House Speaker Mike Johnson on the same day, and he's going to meet with senators to make his pitch. And as things stand now, Republicans are still looking for concessions from Democrats on the border issues. They want changes to the asylum laws. So we'll see how all of that plays out. As the Biden administration is looking for all this money, a poll has found that nearly half of American voters think the U.S. is spending too much on the conflict. So this poll was conducted by Financial Times and Michigan Ross, found that 48% of respondents believe the U.S. was spending too much on military and financial aid to Ukraine, while 27% said the U.S. was spending the right amount, and just 11% believe Washington should be spending more. So just 11% think they should be spending more. That means only 11% of the people responding to this poll think that Congress should authorize this over $60 billion. And Republicans are more opposed to the U.S. spending on the war. 65% said the U.S. was doing too much, compared with 52% of independents and 32% of Democrats. So these results do not bode well for Zelensky. Unfortunately, I do think the hawks in Congress are still determined to get this funding. So I won't be surprised if they do get it. And this poll also actually posed the same question about U.S. spending on military aid for Israel since October 7th and found similar results, slightly more support for sending more to Israel. But the poll found 40% of respondents believed the U.S. was spending too much, while 30% said the U.S. was spending the right amount. Several polls now have shown that the majority of American voters favor a ceasefire in Gaza, which has been rejected by the Biden administration. Another one from Kyle. And this is about Jack Teixeira, the U.S. Air National Guardsman who allegedly leaked the Discord leaks. Some of that stuff revealed, one thing that those leaks revealed is that the U.S. did not think Ukraine could regain much territory in the counteroffensive, but they pushed for it anyway. So that was a pretty big leak. But they, I know this investigation, they determined that Teixeira acted alone, but they relieved his commanding officer because they're saying he should have raised the alarm after he was informed that Teixeira was seeking information that was outside the scope of his position. And airmen working night duty like Teixeira had ample opportunity to access classified sites and print a high volume of products without supervision or detection. That's what this report said. And in total, 15 Air National Guardsmen, including the commander, received some form of discipline over the Teixeira leaks. So saying that basically the people around him should have known something was up and should have done something to stop it. And he was posting these classified documents onto Discord, onto a server that he had with his friends that he made. He's a young guy, he made friends online during the pandemic. I believe, if I remember his story correctly, his last year of high school was locked down, which is something I can't imagine, being that young and having to deal with that. And then, he made friends online, and it seems like he was trying to impress them by posting these classified documents. Allegedly, that's what he's being accused of by the U.S. government.
At MIT, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate MIT's code of conduct or rules regarding bullying and harassment? Yes or no? If targeted at individuals, not making public statements. Yes or no? Calling for the genocide of Jews does not constitute bullying and harassment? I have not heard calling for the genocide of Jews on our campus. But you've heard chants for intifada. I've heard chants, which can be anti-Semitic depending on the context, when calling for the elimination of the Jewish people. So those would not be according to the MIT's code of conduct or rules. That would be investigated as harassment if pervasive and severe.
Let's pause it for a second there. I'm sorry. So it's MIT, UPenn, and Harvard. So Rob, I see you smiling already. So I'm sorry. It's hard. Listen, I do understand. Here's the thing I want to express going into this. There is so much ridiculousness and hypocrisy on all sides of this that it just shows you how bad. It's like, wow, how have we fallen to this level as a society? This one to me feels like one of the biggest. This feels like one of the biggest moments in the battle for free speech. And a lot of people maybe won't like this. And, that's the thing about free speech. You don't necessarily like what people are saying with it. But it feels to me like a really, really big deal that Alex Jones is back on Twitter. I don't know what your thoughts are.
I love it. I mean, it was crazy. That was the first sign of the tech censorship, was they all took him off the internet at the exact same time. And I'm not, you might be surprised with my interest in conspiracy theory. He's not a guy I ever really listened to. He became more of an internet sensation, I think, after being canceled. For the most part, I don't follow him. I listened to half that Tucker interview and I was shocked to hear, I was like, these are mostly opinions I have in terms of, what the World Economic Forum and others are trying to do. So I guess is more, the ideas he's putting out there now don't seem to be too far away from my current perspective. But yeah, just the fact that you got Twitter being more of a free speech absolute place, that even people with reprehensible opinions or people that have gotten things very wrong or offended or otherwise, I think I prefer the paradigm of free speech in an absolute.
Well, yes, I agree with you on that. I'll say this. I think that Alex Jones got some things wrong at Elon Musk, and fair enough, but he was questioning Alex Jones today about Sandy Hook and what he got wrong about that. And, there were things where people would question him about what he got wrong. And I think it's totally reasonable to hold him responsible for what he got wrong. But if you're going to hold him responsible for what he got wrong, then it seems to me that what would be fair would be to also credit him for what he got right. And what he got right was a lot. Now, and this is the issue with Alex Jones. You can't take away what he got right. And this is a guy who predicted 9/11 before 9/11 happened. And even, I think, predicted that it would be the World Trade Center. And this guy got, if you want to talk about what he got right over the last 20 years, I'll tell you what he got right was every war. Every war he was against. Totally against the war in Iraq, the war in Syria, the war in Libya, all of them. He was totally against them. Joe Rogan, who's a mutual friend of mine and Alex Jones, the reason why this is what Joe has said publicly many times, so I'm not giving anything away that he's told me privately, but one of the things or one of the main reasons why Joe Rogan really respects Alex Jones, and he said this, is because Alex Jones told Joe Rogan about Epstein Island over a decade ago, when no one else, way before any of us knew about this. He told him, he goes, there's this guy, Jeffrey Epstein, and he brings all the powerful people to this island where they rape children and blah, 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 and had this whole thing laid out. And so I'm just like, hey, if you want to knock him for what he got wrong, fine, but you got to also give him credit for what he got right. It's not fair to do one, but not the other. So there's that. But anyway, the reason why I think Elon Musk bringing Alex Jones back onto Twitter is such a big deal is because, as you kind of alluded to, Rob, this was the biggest cancellation attempt. This was, it was up there. There's a few that you could mention. Alex Jones being booted off of all the major platforms in clear coordination within a very short period of time was a big one. The cancellation attempt of Joe Rogan was a big one, and that failed. The Alex Jones one seemed to have succeeded. Look, the Andrew Tate cancellation was a big one, and that seems to have failed. And now with Alex Jones coming back, it's almost like, oh, it seems like that one failed too. And that's a really big deal. The canceling people thing used to really work. And there's lots of examples where it's worked. Lots of people have been canceled from, corporate press positions where they're not relevant the way they used to be. Okay. But the biggest ones in the last couple of years have totally failed. And Rogan, Andrew Tate, those were big ones. They totally failed. They just got bigger after this big attempt to cancel them. Alex Jones was one that seemed like it succeeded. And now he's been brought back. And not only has he been brought back, but on this Twitter Spaces today, he said that he's bringing his show to Twitter. And you see Tucker Carlson, who was the biggest guy in cable news, was fired from Fox News and brought his show to Twitter and got even bigger than he was. And now Alex Jones is back on Twitter and is, at least it seems, like going to bring his show back to Twitter. And that's crazy. That means that this guy with the most anti-government message, and not just an anti-government message, but the best kind of anti-government message, a message that's like, not only should you oppose what the people in Washington, D.C. are doing, but you should be skeptical of them at every turn because there are evil people in there that are plotting against you. That guy went from being denied any platform to being gifted the biggest platform. That's a big deal. I'm pretty interested to see where this goes.
And it's a stamp of approval for free speech.
Yep.
It's saying, hey, no, we're going to live with free speech. And I think the machine has a hard time contending with it because people like truth. They like information. And I think the machine relies on being able to, shorten the scope of available information to you so that, you can pick between two of the same options.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And that I think the whole
a not good first move by Zelensky when he got to town. Zelensky says Putin is inspired by the Capitol Hill deadlock on Ukraine. And he said it in an even worse way than that, hence our title, which is that he's claiming that Republicans who are hesitant are inspiring Putin. Now let's listen to Zelensky. Now I would say this, Dr. Paul, in his own words, but you watch him deliver this. We're going to listen to a minute of this. Don't start it quite yet. You watch this and you tell me, now there's a rumor that they've got about 100 PR firms under contract in the D.C. Beltway. So there's a lot of our money going around. You listen to him read this speech very, very badly, and it's not just because he's not a native speaker. He's reading the words of some PR flack who wrote this, especially if you look at the turns of phrase. They're not something a Ukrainian would say. They're absolutely American. They're written by Americans, but they're written badly for him to deliver. And let's listen to him as he insults Republicans and and demeans himself. Here we go. Let's put it up and listen to it. First minute.
Any of you with a son or daughter in combat zone just wouldn't get it if they were told that protecting lives could wait because there's a little more debating. Let me be frank with you, friends. If there's anyone inspired by unresolved issues on Capitol Hill, it's just Putin and his sick clique. They see the dreams come true when they see the delays or some scandals, and they see freedom to fall when the support of freedom fighters go down. And people like Putin shouldn't even hope to conquer freedom. And we can show our children, grandchildren, what real confidence is.
Obviously not written by him. It's written by a PR guy who we pay with our tax dollars. But the message is there. Now, if I'm a Senate Republican, even if I'm kind of like, hey, maybe we should give him some money, this would really irritate me because he says, all this debating, all these scandals, he's probably meaning the corruption scandals in Ukraine, all of these things coming out, it's all your fault. You are just appeasing Putin by doing this. Americans who will watch this guy talk that way to Senator, I don't know. What do you think?
Can I sign a check?
Yeah.
I want to donate money to this guy.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a real tragedy. I think what we're witnessing and what's really happening and why the pressure is there. Yeah, there's pressure for Christmas vacations. There's pressure on the budgets. There's pressures on our borders. But I think the big issue is that there's pressure on the American empire.
Yeah.
Because this was a strategy that was designed, by our side, doing things that we didn't do immediately because we were wanting to get a peace dividend. And we did have a peace dividend, but it didn't last very long because after a few years, people got antsy. Well, we need to, the Russians might, get powerful again and invade Europe. So they had to concoct an enemy. So they create their enemy by doing what they're doing. And in a way, though, how foolish this is and how close we are to total bankruptcy, it's going to put some dent into the empire power, and I think that's good. I think that eliminates a lot of power from our military-industrial complex. It removes the power of the secrecy and what goes on in our Federal Reserve System. It puts a dent in this exclusion. I mean, it's so disgusting when they talk about the Democrats are saying the former president he's created an insurrection. Yeah. Well, this is crazy. If you want to see an insurrection, go to the border.
Yeah,
I mean, what did they do? They say, "Oh, we're going to invade you, but okay, we're not going to fight you. We're going to open up the doors and we're going to buy you a hotel room and we're going to take care of you. We're going to feed you." It's total insanity, and the insanity is catching up. Well, with the American people, but I would hope that not only it's a good chance that they won't get their money before the new year, the $60 billion, but let's just hope and pray they don't get it, and it puts a damper on trying to admit the truth. The truth is they've lost the war over there.
Yeah, everyone knows it. Yeah.
And that means that you love Hitler, that you love Putin, and therefore you have to be stopped because you're unpatriotic. And but I think there's a big change going on, and some of it could be very positive, but somebody has to fill the vacuum. And of course, we do our best to try to describe what it would be like if we had a republic effort, and try to restore the principles of a republic. But we have a long way to go. Although there's been inroads, there's more people talking about it and they understand it. But right now, I think the deep state and wokeism is when you look at what's going on in our universities. That to me was a wake-up call. Wokeism. Look at the results of wokeism in our universities.
Michael Tracy tweeted this. Zelensky met with U.S. arms manufacturers yesterday in D.C. Here he is pictured alongside executives from Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Northrop Grumman, General Dynamics, and others. Looks like many lucrative business opportunities are still ahead for these valued partners. He actually here is doing the quiet part out loud. He's meeting with these delighted weapons manufacturers who are billions of dollars richer because of this war. And I think, Dr. Paul, that is why there's this last-ditch effort. The people you see in that picture are terrified that the spigot will be turned off, because that spigot is their enormous wealth that continues to flow into these people at the expense of us.
We have to hang on to the picture, because I get questions. Who are these people? Who's in the deep state? Who has the control? Yeah. And I try not to say, well, I have the names of the 12 people. There are about 12 people there. They're pretty prime members of the deep state. But I think it's a little bit more complex than that. But there is a deep state, and they represent it. And they've been elusive. But here, this picture is something else. And they're not even shy, about this. In the past, I think they assumed that the American people would know if we're making profits. Remember progressive Democrats used to frown on the military-industrial complex making money.
Yeah.
But now they're part of it.
They love it. Yeah.
So there's a lot of things going on there. So I think that's a great picture, and people should look at that and say, "Are you serious?"
Yeah.
And somebody add up how much money each one of those companies get.
Oh yeah.
Have gotten over the last 10 years or something, and it's into the many billions of dollars.
Yeah. He's their cash cow. That's what
and also what they spent it on was weapons. Well, that's national defense. That's a lot of baloney.
Yeah.
We don't get blown up in spite of ourselves, but we blow up a lot of other people, and we cause a lot of other people to go to war, and we have our side, and they have their side, and yet we're on both sides sometimes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
As long as you can keep producing the weapons. Right now, they're not worried about having used up all these weapons, because they're going to be, the manufacturers are back at it again. And they're going to cry about, oh, we're in trouble now, and you better subsidize us. But the whole effort is subsidies and support for a principle that's completely wrong.
Yeah.